Good morning all, and welcome to another recruitment discussion from Jump. This week we're covering the billing manager or operational leader. Which one creates the best results? When I was starting to research this week, it was quite interesting. I couldn't find stats. What I found, a lot of written articles about this. And there's a great written article from Forbes who talk about one of the biggest differentiators between frontline salespeople and sales managers, and they're classing sales managers as a non-targeted person from their own billings point of view, is their critical ability to think. They found that managers scored higher on assessments of reasoning and critical thinking rather than frontline salespeople. They also found that they scored significantly higher when it comes to developing and applying business strategy. They were more likely to consider strategic issues when making decisions and propose innovation solutions and translate broad goals into actionable objectives that support the organization. So they can see past the immediate victories of sales, and instead they were looking at the small actions that actually feed the business and make the business better. Managers also scored higher on data-driven decision-making, indications that they're more likely to combine multiple sources of information, metrics, and data, and make a better decision on that for their salespeople. Another majority finding that they discovered was that managers place a higher value on altruism. Where most salespeople tend to be extremely competitive, the manager focused on servicing the greater good of the organization. And just like coaching and playing the game in different activities that require different skills, mindset, and personalities in the same sales, they uncovered the competence required for great sales managers and considered when recruiting sales managers up the line to utilize and validate customized assessments to truly identify what develops great coaches and great sales organizations. So it's really interesting sort of reading through all these articles, etc., what's going on. So this week I'm joined by the full team. So there's Paul, Heather, and Dave. They're all in their places in the UK. I hear it's raining in the UK. I hear it's snowing. No. I hear it's snowing in Yorkshire. I'm in Lanzarote. It's just a touch windy. So let's jump in straight into the questions straight away. Okay, so the first question is, what's the difference between a billing manager and an operational leader? Heather, I think you wanted to sort of come in on this one. You said you had a really good sort of view of this and what that looked like.
Howard, you know I always loved the first question. Thank you so much for that. Honestly, for me, this is about what we measure in terms of performance of individuals and what we expect people to impact. So for me, billing managers is actually, it's a training role. It's an opportunity to start to develop a different skill set from the one you would use when you're on a desk as a recruitment consultant. And an operational leader is less directly involved on a desk, less directly involved in being targeted and being measured on sales. Not that they're divorced from sales at all, but less directly targeted, and therefore get to spend more time on strategy and on the business rather than in the business. Billing managers are in the business. Operational leaders are working some of the time on the business.
Interesting view. Paul, Dave?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree entirely with what Heather said, which is an unusual experience, but on this occasion, I have to agree completely. And I think that it is exactly that. It's a billing manager is very much, as they say these days, on the tools, somebody who is very much involved in producing the revenues and often is the number one biller in that particular division or business, and is focused very, very closely on generating high levels of income with responsibility for managing other people around them. And I think there is a difference between that role, a very big difference, and being an operational leader, because as Heather rightly says, operational leaders are working through their people, are working strategically, are coaching, are training, are leading, are inspiring people around them, and are ultimately moving a business, managing a business unit, which in itself is a self-contained business, generating revenues, developing client base and relationships, rather than having a single or a very sort of mono focus on generating individual or personal revenue.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because most of the clients that I'm working with are running businesses between sort of 10 to 40 people, and the leaders still occupy both those roles. They're still billing.
Yep.
They've still got the senior customer relationships, because often they've started the business and they've grown from 2 to 4 to 10 to 12 to 15. And they're still navigating their way into, how do I let go of my billing and focus more on the business and that operational strategy side? So it's quite important, the definition that you two have come up with, because it helps people to think how they build their business and the roles that they need to occupy. But often it's the leaders of the businesses letting go to allow others to occupy one of those two roles.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we're all saying the same thing, that those billing managers who are targeted for their own performance versus operational manager who is targeted for the overall performance of their team. And the difference between them is when you start to look at that sales performance versus management performance, it's all about what's getting the best out of the people around you rather than what's getting the best out of the individual. And what I find is that, because I've seen exactly the same what Paul and Dave are saying there, I've got leaders as well who are still billing, and they're more interested in their billing sometimes than they are the overall operational service of the business, and that's where the business starts to stutter. So if we start to look at that, so in your experience then, which one delivers the best results? I think there's the quick key to the question that sort of says billing versus operational. Which one delivers, in your experience, the best results?
Okay, well, I'll kick this one off. And it depends on what you mean by delivering the best results, because you could argue very strongly that if you're an outstanding biller, if we can use that expression, then maybe delivering the best results, depending on your mindset and your career trajectory and what you're aiming to achieve in your career, delivering the best results might be you staying and developing a great desk. Because delivering the best results for you personally might be a case of you just focusing on your own billings. And as we've just talked about last week, and we're no doubt going to get to this again, it's not always the case that people that are brilliant consultants want to transition into being, as you put it earlier, an operational leader. But if you are looking for an overall improvement in performance, let's say for supposition, you have a team of 5, 8, 10 people, then ultimately managing through those people, not billing very much or anything at all directly, will give you better results. Because clearly, if your job is to grow a business, to develop a team, then you have to stop doing certain things in order to place your energies and your focus into the people that you are responsible for. And that is extremely difficult when you have a larger team of people. To be billing directly and hit the same numbers you were hitting before when you were a single biller, when you're managing others, you can't. It's almost impossible to do. You in order to generate a collective revenue that hits the company or the target for that division, you're going to have to step back from billing either partially or completely. So the answer to your question, I think, is best results depends on what you want. If you want to develop your own billings, then my advice is don't manage very many people. If, on the other hand, you want your career to develop as a leader, then you're going to have to step away from billing directly over a period of time.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Paul's saying. It depends to a degree on how big you are, how long you've been around, where you, and what your goals are. So, if you want to stay a small, successful, financially stable organization, carry on, as a leader of the organization, carry on directly billing. Nothing wrong with that. No. But if your goal is to scale your business, I don't see conceivably how a leader of a business that wants to grow and scale can spend any significant time directly on the desk and still be doing, without absolutely killing themselves in terms of time management, doing the work that's needed to develop the people around them, to bring new people in, to keep new people, to do all of the things that a leader needs to do to scale the business. So I think, once you get to 10 or 15 people in your business, it's sorry if I'm saying something out of turn, completely unrealistic for a leader of business to be billing at that point directly. Should be giving every billing opportunity to the people around them to allow those people to develop the skills and to get some financial return.
Dave?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember when I was on the tools, so to speak, and I was running a contract desk, and I developed a good relationship with Lloyd's, and we were placing contractors galore, and it took up all of my time. But my boss wanted me to be the ops director for the region. And I was earning well, I was doing well, and he could see that the longer I stayed in that billing role, the more difficult it was going to be for him to promote me into this new role. And he wanted to promote me because he was going to get promoted to be the MD, but he couldn't do it until he had somebody else to take over from him. And he basically sat me down one day and said, you have to stop from, and he gave me a month basically. And after that, put a transition into play. But once you become an operational leader at this company, you don't do billing. And I was kind of like forced not to bill. But to Paul's point about results, from the results from the company point of view, you know, we'd grown from 10 to 68 contractors. They were days when we were easily achieving 18, 20% margins. So we were doing really well. But I then became the ops director, and that was that.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, when I look back at my CP days, and I look at offices, I think what Paul's saying there about the size of the team or the size of the business, etc., is fundamental. But what we start to find when we put billing managers in, the office grew steadily, but as soon as we got to a certain size and that person became an operational leader, the actual business accelerated away. And that was a huge difference when you start to see that they were in charge of their P&L, they were in charge of their people, because they could focus on those people. And I think I said last week that, you know, that billing manager has 4 different roles. They've got to be really good at what they do, either, you know, billing in the main thing, but obviously what you've got to also think you've got to be really good at management. The next step is they've got to be part of that management team and really good at part of that management team. So again, it's a huge sort of twist of work. You then say, I've got to be good at managing my team and build my team, and I've also got to deliver the corporate objectives and the corporate value and the corporate mission. No wonder those billing managers are under so much stress. But when you suddenly say to the operational leader, your operational job is just to lead, therefore you are part of that management team, so you can work easy because you don't have to think about your billings. Therefore, you can develop your team at a far better, quicker pace, and therefore you're delivering a better view of what the company's mission and statement is, and the values are down to your people. So I think it's really important that we start to think about that transition from billing manager to ops leader and what that looks like. So the question then should come out there, where should a billing manager role stop and the operational leader's role start?
That's an interesting question. I was just listening carefully to what you said, Howard, and one of the things that I remember from moving from being a billing manager to an operational manager was that, in fact, I didn't actually stop making placements or booking temps, in my case, not contractors, out. My fingerprints were on virtually every client that we worked with and virtually every placement that was pushed over the line or every temp that began in an assignment. I was involved with virtually everything, but I was doing it in collaboration with my consultants. My name never appeared against any of those fees. It did, I suppose, collectively for my business, but I was very involved with everything that went through. To your point that the fee levels obviously then increased over a period of time. So where does a billing manager's role stop an operational lead? It's a grey area, because I'm not really sure it is that stop-start situation. I think it's pretty grey. I don't necessarily think that as a billing manager you stop billing. You just do your billing happens in a different way. It doesn't happen directly against your name, but it generates through the people that you work with and you develop and train and coach, and you see their performances improve, and collectively your business improves. So I think it's not a stop-start situation. It's a transition in its the ability, as I said earlier, to develop other people around you, to get them to be as good a biller as you were, or even better than you were. So I don't see it as a stop-start thing. I think it's just a different approach to generate a higher level of income.
Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. But I think the interesting conundrum is for leaders of businesses that are growing is how do we make that transition? How do we do that? How do we know when one is the other? And so for me, it's about what are you measuring? What are you expecting? What are you targeting on? So that kind of, there is absolutely a developmental line, because as you grow and you skill, there will have been a point, Dave, when your boss saw that you were ready to step away from a desk and add value to his business because of the development opportunities you had. And so I think for leaders, it's about how do we individually develop the people in our teams until they've got the skills to add enough value to your business to take them off a billing desk, because there's absolutely a commercial reality about that cost in your business. But then it's about, well, what do you target them on? So for me, that line is around what are we measuring and what are we expecting? So we stop expecting personal billings from an operational manager. And what we do is we ask them to increase the performance of the people in their operational team. And so it's about measuring the right things. And that's the shift and the switch that you have to make, is what am I rewarded on as an operational manager that's different from what I was rewarded on as a billing manager, and what am I measured on? So there's some practical things, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, isn't it? Because in recruitment, people behave as to how they're rewarded.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a direct relationship.
If you reward them with commission that says get your contractors up from 10 to 60, but then stop doing that and reward them through other people, most people would say, okay, well, show me where I have to earn the money and what I have to do to develop X, Y, and Z, or to open up a new geography, or open up a new division, or focus on the implementing strategy. And if there's a reward that will go with that, and I'm assuming that there would be, then that's what they'll do. And if they're led well, then they'll follow that road.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, when you start to move from one to another, it's that transitional stage. And I remember going that transitional stage myself and panicking, going from there's my target to, oh my God, look at that target. Yeah, that's absolutely huge. But then realized I got so many other people that could help me build that target. And it was dividing that out and saying, right, what can I do to do that and push that? And so I think a lot of businessman owners are fearful of taking that person off the tools because they think they're going to lose the billings, whether or not those billings disseminate into the team if the manager does it right.
Yeah.
But then it gives the opportunity for people to grow, because that manager now can focus on what's there in front of them as the people. And that's what you were saying there, Paul, that view of, although you'd not put your name to any of the deals, your D&A was running through all of those deals. And what you tend to find as a billing manager, the D&A is running through my deals and a small proportion of everyone else's deals, where an operational leader, your D&A is running through every single deal, because you're working with every single person in a different way, hence why it accelerates. So when should the billing manager role stop and the operational role leaders start? I think it's whether as a team or whether as a business, you start to get over a certain number of heads, then you've got to start focus on the strategy rather than just the billing. And that's the reason why lots of companies in the UK never get above 10 heads. And when we say 10 heads, that could be 10 to 15, dropping back to 10, dropping back to 8, going back to 15, etc. But they never accelerate above that 20, because it's all about fill. There's no one actually looking at the operational views. So that leads to the second sort of part of that question, which is, in your experience, does the billing manager need training before making that step?
And the answer is yes, because what Dave described was a perfect example. In 4 weeks, you need to get out of this space and into something else, and that happens a lot. Basically, we shouldn't be altogether surprised that ultimately people struggle when they're given this brand new responsibility, having not really been prepared for it in advance. We should always be looking ahead in every business and saying, well, where are we now? Where do we want to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years? And who amongst us are the people who've already identified as being current or future leaders? What do we need to be able to do with those people to ensure that when they're given the opportunity, not if, when they're given the opportunity, they're raring to go, they've been prepared well, they've been coached correctly, that it's not a horrible shock for them, that they go home on a Friday evening as a billing manager on Monday, they're no longer billing. How do we get their minds in that space, prepared and ready, so that we're setting them up to succeed, rather than pushing them over the edge, as Dave experienced, and hoping to goodness one way or another they're going to be all right. So the answer really is about preparation. It's also about vision, understanding where the business is going, where you want it to go, how many people are likely to be in each individual area or sector, and so forth. A lot of it comes down, of course, to leadership views and goals, and sharing those visions with everybody in the organization, so that people have a very, very clear understanding of where their careers can go. Now, there are career choices for people, as we said earlier. It isn't right to expect everybody to want to transition to be a leader, and to develop into that individual that's going to be the facilitator of other people's careers. Not everybody wants that, and that's perfectly fine. But let's find the guys that do want to do it and start to help them move into that space before it happens, so that we're not setting them up for failure, as I said.
Yeah, I love the quote, actually, Howard, on the slide that you. Yeah. It's fantastic, isn't it? Because I do think it begins with the realization, and for me, that coaching that you're talking about, Paul, is helping future leaders understand that the skills and the behaviors that got them where they are, that make them successful on their desk, aren't the same set of skills and behaviors that they're going to need to demonstrate and display as they move through billing manager and into operational leadership role. And so for them, having the humility to understand that they're still a work in progress and that they need to learn new stuff, and the clarity about what that is, and the courage to step off what for many people who make that transition has been an incredibly successful career to date, to step off into the unknown where, they might not always get it right. And to be able to support them as an organization, to have that courage to step into the unknown and start demonstrating behaviors and skills. For me, that I think that slide's fantastic. And there are some really different skills that they need to display, about how you manage other people, about how you motivate other people, even about how you make decisions in whose interest. You're not making decisions because it's in the interest of your desk. You're making decisions in the interest of the organization and the team, and that helicopter thinking, all of those things, they're practical differences to the way they behave that we have to prepare them for, or we should prepare them for before we ask people to take that really courageous step.
And I think one of the words from that slide, Heather, that jumps out at me is clarity.
Yeah.
With training, clearly becomes education, which brings clarity to what is this new role that I'm expected to work to? What do I have to do? How do I do it? What are the measurements? And the training will help. And what happens is, and I found this a number of times in my career, the person that I thought would make a great operational leader actually doesn't want to move into that role, because they're enjoying both the income and the work. They really enjoy placing contractors, placing permanent people, weaving together some solutions and things like that. And that's actually what they want to do. Yeah. They don't want to move. And often we think about it as moving up, but actually it's a different role.
Yeah.
And they don't want to make that jump into that other role. And how they found that out is by training. So we spent time training them and educating them and saying, this is how you deal with this, and this is how you deal with a board, and this is how you deal with, and they're like, oh, I don't want any of that, thank you. I just want to place some people into jobs. And that's okay.
It was interesting, sort of last year I did a management session with a team. So 5 sessions over 5 months. It was interesting. There was about 9 or 10 people on there, but 3 or 4 of them stayed on the course, but then at the end said, I now realise I don't want to be a manager because it doesn't suit what I want to do right now and where I'm going right now. And that was the idea. These were all people who were up and coming into management team. The guys that are set and said they wanted to become a manager, they've suddenly seen an acceleration in their business because they've stepped into roles with a clear understanding of what they need to be doing, rather than just that fear. I remember stepping into that role and I just sat there with a P&L going, OMG, how am I going to do all this? With no training, no preparation, etc. It was just off you go. And it's really interesting, I think, that there needs to be training, but it's not training on how to manage your P&L. That's only a very small part of it. It's training on how to manage your people and how to develop your people. And I think the best piece of feedback I got from one of my staff, who was a huge biller, became on to be a huge manager, now runs a very big recruitment agency. She said, what you're great at, H, is you motivate me to the absolute hilt, but you can bring me back to the ground in a look and a glance, because you know exactly what motivates me and how to stop me instantly so I don't get too big for my boots. And that was a real sort of, to me, thought, well, that means I understand her absolutely inside and out. And that was the sort of thing that I looked at. So if we're all saying that operational leaders create better results, why don't more agencies move their managers into this role either earlier or at all? Because some people don't actually move anybody into these type of roles. Why not?
It's a complicated question.
Yeah, very complicated question.
Where do you begin? I mean, I think number one, especially with small businesses, and I think this is entirely understandable, if you've got one or several big billers, there is a risk in removing them from a desk where they're generating whatever that number is. And for the owner of the business, it's a challenge, you know, removing that person and running the risk that potential invoicing disappears is clearly a concern. And I get that. This is back to the point about making sure that when you do move people across into the next role, that you've covered off those bases. You've got the safety nets in place. You're not taking a massive gamble in removing somebody for a high biller from a desk and then discovering that the whole thing falls away. You've got to make sure those safety nets are in place. So timing is very important. The second thing, of course, we've talked about it, is that some people don't want to move away from billing, and that's fine too. You know, we had a few weeks ago one of our clients talking about being forced into being a manager when she didn't want to be a manager, and what she did ultimately was leave that business, and the business lost in every respect because they lost a great biller and they also lost the revenue from that individual, and she's gone on to be a very successful person herself in her own right. But unfortunately carries with her a fear of managing other people again because of that experience, which is a terrific shame. But I think the bottom line here is you've got to be clear in your own mind that that person wants to be a manager, wants to be moving away from billing. So, you know, I do understand, I think we all understand, because we work with a lot of different recruitment businesses, the fear around it. It comes back to one very important point. It's having strategy in place. It's not moving in a position where you're knee-jerking. Right, tomorrow, Dave, in 4 weeks' time, you've got to move off that desk. You know, that isn't strategic thinking. That is knee-jerk reactions. And what we have to do, and this is where the disciplines come in, is be consistently looking ahead and asking ourselves, what's my business going to look like? What do I want it to be in 12, 24, 36 months? And there are some deep, deep questions around that will ultimately bring you back. What we do very often is move from our current position, looking at today and making decisions today, when really the art of strategy is to look ahead a year, 2 years, 3 years, decide on what success looks like at that point or those points and work backwards from that position. So I think it's a difficult question because we could spend the next hour at least answering this one question. I'll move on to Heather. I know Heather's itching to say something. I can see it on her face.
I think the key is strategy. I think you have to plan for this. You can't do it overnight. You can't suddenly create a business that can afford to have an operational leader who's not on a desk and billing, or miraculously turn somebody into an individual with the skills and the knowledge and the motivation to do it. And so we need to plan for it, you know, and as an industry, we're not brilliant at planning, are we? We aren't brilliant at strategy. And so I think it really is exactly what you say, Paul. We have to understand the importance of it and then put a plan in place to achieve it and be willing to take some risk. And I think sometimes maybe there's a little bit of fear in there as well.
Yeah,
you know, you're taking a risk. But in fact, it's possible with good strategy and good planning and good development and good coaching to actually mitigate all of that risk and get all of the benefit of it, because it really is massively beneficial, as we've all said, to have somebody who is constantly working on the business and on the people in the business. Absolutely is how you scale. So if what's stopping you is fear, there are lots of things you can do to mitigate that by proper planning, proper development, and good clarity, as you said, Dave.
And it's the thing I think that most recruitment leaders struggle with, is the time it takes out of the day job to do strategy, to sit there and plan and think about where do I want to take my business? How many people will that involve? What does that look like? What does it need? Where does the market come in? And also to go for the roles that the business need, not based on the people that are already in the business. So they put the roles first and then decide, actually, have I got the people that can fill those roles? Right, what training needs do I need for those people? Because I often say to companies, the people you have working for you now may not be the ones that are going to get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good point.
In recruitment, often what we do is, I need a manager. Oh, she's really good, I'll give her the job. And it may not work. So I think strategy is the answer to this.
It's interesting, isn't it? So if I think about those big sales meetings that we had at CP, where we had all the team leaders, etc., come into a room, you could spot the difference between the billing manager and the operational manager. Because the billing manager was on their phone constantly, they were texting people constantly because they were looking after their billings. The operational managers were clued into what we were talking about and how to develop and deliver that strategy. And it was interesting when you went back to their offices were run precision and they were growing hugely, where the billing offices with the billing managers in were growing, but only based around that billing manager's capability to grow their own billings. So I think that you're right, there's fear, there's risk, there's lots of strategy that needs putting into place and lots of planning to put into place to create these type of roles. But I think if you are an entrepreneurial leader, you've got to start to think, why did you get yourself into running your own business? It wasn't to bill, it was to grow a business. And therefore you've got to create that succession plan below you to do that. And without the succession plan, we don't get above that 10 to 15 heads, which most recruitment agencies have that blocker at. And I think that's when we start to see. So you start to look at most businesses that are above that, they normally have a reasonable, solid managed structure that aren't billing and pulling people through. So the question is, why do operational leaders then produce better results? We keep saying that we know they produce better results, but why? Why is it they produce better results?
Well, I mean, great operational leaders are, and we've alluded to this point, are also inspirational people. You said it yourself, Howard, about somebody that you used to work with you who found you very inspirational, which is, difficult to believe, but if you say so, then we
I was shocked, people. I was shocked all the time.
Yeah, well, it's a revelation. But I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, great leaders inspire people, and there is we know there's a big difference between managing and leading. Managing is task oriented. It's getting things done, and there is a real art to that. Let's be very clear. Great managers are very valuable people for a business. But there is a difference between leading and managing, and I think leading goes way beyond. It gets into the whole area of psychology and how you really win hearts and minds and get people behind what you're attempting to do. We often talk about that. It's become a cliche, the why. The Simon Sinek why. Yeah, it's getting people to buy into the why. And so I think that goes way beyond, let's get CVs over, let's make sure we get interviews arranged today, let's whatever, and all the operational stuff, which is obviously vital so that we make money, but it goes way beyond that point. So getting better results, going from good to brilliant, comes down to inspirational leadership rather than pure management.
And it comes back to that point we made earlier when we say, produce better results. What do we mean by results? What are the results that we're looking for the operational leader to achieve? And can she or he, are they in a better position? Are we giving them the right training, the support, the development to deliver those results? Because if all of those things are aligned, then that operational leader can deliver better results. Or you can have a win-win situation where the person moves into an operational leadership role. The billing role that they previously had is occupied by somebody who's been promoted and developed and trained and has got the customer relationship skills to take it on. To go back to my Lloyd's example, I thought quite good at Lloyd's and did a good job. And so did my boss, and I got promoted. The guy that came in after me, Neil, did an even better job. He was much better, much better. And he needed the opportunity to flourish. And actually me being in that role was stopping him developing. So we got a win-win. So it wasn't better results. We got better results for the billing person. And I guess different results with me being the ops leader.
Yeah. For me, Howard, it's about two things really. One is time and the other's focus. The reason why ops managers are so impactful is that they have the time away from the day-to-day billing activity to focus on the things that we as an organization have said are important. Now, whether that is building high-level client relationships, being able to move us into different markets, develop an RPO product, or whether it's hiring new staff to come in, developing the ones we've got, keeping them, all of those things take time and focus. And you have to create space and time and focus to drive those things forward in your organization if you want change and growth.
And you're right, Heather. I mean, it comes down to the points that you often see in those effective management books, where what you're trying to do is get management or leaders to spend 70% of their time looking outside of the business, so to speak, rather than what we all do when we're involved in the business, spending 70-80% of our time dealing with the daily stuff. And of course, when you're doing that, to your point, you don't have the time or the ability to look up over your desk and figure out what the heck's coming in your direction. So giving people the space, you're completely right, to give them the opportunity, and it's a gift to be able to look ahead, to look around, to be involved more with clients, to see what's going on in the markets, the trends, and all those things, networking and so forth. That requires the gift of time, and you can only do that if you remove people from billing desks.
Yeah, quite interesting is that one of my mad moments as a manager and training people, I remember taking everyone in an office and we said, right, I want you to write down what your big challenges were, and these to all the managers, etc. And it was all internal focus. It was all about the team. It was all about this, etc. And I put everyone into the window and said, tell me what you see. And they said, we don't see anything, we just see people. And I said, I see a consultant there from Progressive walking to one of our clients. I see a consultant there just about to jump to a taxi going to Esso, another one of our clients. And I just started to say, our competition is outside the room. If we start to fix what we need inside the room, so let's not address the people, let's address the problems. And once we cure the problems, then the people will come. And what we tend to find is then what we had operational leaders that would address the problems, our tenure would stay, so we'd have the consultants being there longer. Our client management would improve. And as Dave said, what we started to find was people who were good at the job, and it was getting out of their way and letting them do the job that they were good at. And that's what we started to find, where what we tend to find in offices where they are rotating around that big biller, everyone's sort of treading on a little bit on eggshells about upsetting the big billers to a certain degree. And that's why operational leaders create a better result all round, because they're focused on the overall result, not everyone looking at the individual result of that one person. So they're all looking in, comparing themselves to that one person, rather than looking out and looking at the competition outside. So a very quick answer, starting with team leader, what would your management structure look like?
I know this is going to sound crass, but I think, although we end up with very, very convoluted organization charts, the best structures are flat. Howard, you love Chinese proverbs and these wise men from many, many years ago. But one of them, I can't remember who it was, said that the best form of leadership is to lead from behind, lead from the rear, so to speak, which I get completely, because I think that great leaders are all about supporting and working for their people, not the other way around. All the great leaders I work with spend their entire time looking after the people that work with them and see themselves as serving those people, rather than that more arrogant attitude of believing that from a hierarchical perspective, all these people work for me, aren't I wonderful? I think having a great business is about serving the people that work for you, making sure you do everything in your power to support them, not only from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective. This is hearts and minds again, but it's got to be authentic. So in a way, although we could come up with some convoluted answer, for me, it's very flat. I think, you know, when I used to go into my offices all over the country, I was the one that volunteered to go in the kitchen and make tea for everybody, even though I was the CEO of a big business. I never saw it as, you know, I'm more important than anyone else. I didn't see that at all. I thought it was completely the other way around. So I feel like it's a very flat thing. The great businesses are where people are collective and are as a sense of collaboration and sort of brotherhood, if you like. I'm not sure that's a PC thing to say these days, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's twice now. Guys and now brotherhood.
Yeah, well, whatever. Whatever. And I never said that I was good at this PC stuff.
If you look at what you're talking about there, Paul, just to sort of push this on a little bit. If you look at Good to Great by Jim Collins,
yes.
and he looked at that 15 years data of a company's growth. So it wasn't just, you know, you've grown and then you've dropped. It was a long time, a 15-year data set that they looked at. And they looked at the managers. They weren't what he was classing as the trophy managers, the promotional managers, all these people you'd never heard of. And he said you'd never heard of because they were quiet, unassuming people, would just get on and do their job. But I think it was the humility bit on the slide before. You know, they all had that humility, and that's what it's about. And so that starting structure should be able to create people into those positions, you know, and there'll be lots of different views of it. But I think once you start to hit that team leader position, that's when you start to think, right, this is my management structure. This is the line that you're going down. This is the training that we're going to give you. And it might then start to separate those people out who are going to be really, really strong managers to those who are just going to be really good billing managers, and start to separate the two out. And I think it's important there that you start at that team leader structure, because that's the first place that you get to, and then start to think, right, what does that management grow around there? Because you're going to get people who are going to carry on billing to a certain degree, and people who are just going to be really good at management. How do you separate those two out? And I think that's when you have that structure, and then that drops back into strategy about what's going on. But, you know, your conversation there, Paul, is that you were the best team maker in Office Angels is absolutely right. But it was all about humility. It was all about developing from the front. And that's what all the great leaders have, that they have that humility to be able to sort of listen and get out of people's way and let them.
I might add, I make great coffee, but even better cocktails. So it's not just purely tea, just to be clear on that point. Yeah.
Nice. Howard, the one thing I just would add to that, I know we're getting close to time now, but is alongside whatever structure you put in place, and as of course there are hundreds of different ways you can do that, but it's that understanding what are the skills associated with each of those roles, what's the development that's needed with each of that. And so structure is to some degree interrelated with development and individuals and desire and motivation, and it kind of fits in that whole strategic place. But sometimes I think we miss and forget that part.
Yeah.
So I think then to finish the question off, then, you know, how does this structure then, putting an operational leader in place, change the business morale? Because you look at all the good businesses, you know, it's all about the morale in the business. There's very few really high performing businesses that have a poor morale. Why is it that, you know, this structure creates such great morale in businesses?
Again, for me, it's about time and focus. Sorry to cut across you there, David. It is, if you've got somebody whose job it is to develop the people around them and to focus on helping them be the best that they can be, of course, that's going to have an impact on morale. And I do think it's as simple as that. Yeah. Dave, sorry, I cut across you.
No, I was going to say almost the same thing. It's about communication as well. Does the organisation understand why this person is in this role? Do they understand what the objectives of the role are? How this person will help the business grow, and therefore the individuals will grow? If all of that is communicated well, and by communication I mean that the rest of the organisation has understood what's behind it, not been told what's behind it. Big difference. If they do, then it's great. It will improve morale because everybody will be on board. And those that aren't, there's an opportunity to work with them.
Yeah, and I think when you are demonstrating that people are being developed in your business, they're given the chance to grow their careers, particularly people that you've brought in from, the early days, and you've trained them. I think that's a wonderful signal to give to other people in the business. It's a very strong reason as to why people join companies and stay working for those businesses over a lengthy period of time. So, does it change the morale? Absolutely. In many respects, absolutely improves morale. We live in a time of radical change. Change is just not only is a constant, but change occurs at a rapid rate. And I think a lot of people find that that environment, that dynamic environment, very seductive. If you're working in that environment where constantly things are changing, moving forward, improving, then I think that's an environment a lot of people find very exciting. Yeah. Having a stagnant environment is probably a guarantee that at some point people you value are going to leave your business to extend their careers elsewhere. I actually don't think there's much choice if you're in business. You are literally compelled to grow your company if you wish to attract and retain great talent. Failure to do that means that at some point they will leave you.
I think it's all about that support, isn't it, of the people. If you have, an owner and then big biller and nothing in between that, where does that person go? They've got to go direct to the owner for some support because the big biller usually hasn't got time to talk to them, etc. Or they are giving them very short change on certain things. And I think it gives that extra person that extra level to go and talk to, help develop someone who's listening, someone who's hearing what the business is saying, and then acting on that because they've got time to act on that. And I always say some of the greatest ideas that I ever came out with came from the shop floor and came from people who felt they could come and talk to me and give me ideas because they felt that, maybe they didn't want to talk further up the line, but they felt you as the manager at that level, they could talk to you because, you could potentially influence things that would influence them, where sometimes I think big billers can't do that. So let's close up today. Again, another really interesting one. Next week, we're going to start a whole new series of webinars. The first one is going to be about effective roadmap and visualizing the strategies, initiating your recruitment business that you'll use to hit targets. So everything that we've talked about today, really, which is all about strategy, hitting targets, next week, we're going to put that in. We're going to look at your organizational, grow your goals, your KPIs, competitor analysis, etc., etc. So that's what we're going to start to look at next week. Dave, Paul and Heather, thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gents, thanks for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm now going to the all-inclusive bar. I will see you all on Monday. Still white and pale as I was when I went out.
Make sure your yacht is not impounded, Howard.
Yes, I'll keep the oligarch yacht very well hidden under the radar. See you later, guys. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody. Take good care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.